Hi everyone, this is Subnet Zero and welcome to my channel. So today we will be focusing upon the classes of IP address, how it was before 1993, okay? So just to give you a brief history, is that the year 1993 was quite a pivot point, okay? Before 1993, there were fewer devices connected to the internet. So things were relatively straightforward. Also, another fun fact I want to give you, which is going to absolutely blow your mind, is that private IP address did not exist. Yes, you heard that right. The concept of private IP address before 1993, it was non-existent. Sorry, let me just... Yes, private IP address absolutely did not exist. This entire concept was non-existent before 1993. And why is that? Is that the internet was relatively straightforward, and since there were fewer devices connected to the internet, we did not have to have this complex infrastructure that we had after mid-90s, okay? But to understand the infrastructure of the IP address line classification after mid-90s, we need to get into the deep dive into the history of how it was before, okay? So first we had class A, class B, class C, okay? So class A was 0.0.0.0 to 127.255.255.255. However, just to make few things clear is that this 0.0.0.0 and 127.0.0.1, they are like, either as placeholder IP addresses or for loop back. So this what I'm talking is strictly mathematical, okay? Class A, okay? Now when it comes to class B, it was 128.0.0.0 to 191.255.255.255, and C was 192.0.0.0 to 223.255.255.255, okay? This class D and class E I'll get to later in the end of the video as to how this one, why this one was created and why it is like, this kind of a reserved island. We still use it till date, okay? But first, let's look at class C, since we have already looked into how 192.168, how those IPs work. Let's get into how deep dive into class C. And once we get into class C, I'll go in reverse. Class C, class B, and then class A. And the moment you'll understand how class C works, you will have a better understanding of how B and A also works, okay? So let's isolate class C. Let's zoom into it. And let's analyze its anatomy, okay? So this is class C. It's the numbering begins from 192 to and ends with 223.255.255.255, okay? And if you remember in my previous videos, every network block has 254 usable IP addresses, okay? Why 254? I've explained it in the previous video. So let's look at the first example. In the first example, how it goes in each and every block, okay? Block 1. The network address, the highest point is 192.168.0.0, broadcast of 192.168.0.255, and the usable IPs are the one in between. You can read it for yourself, 192.168.0.1 to 192.168.0.254, okay? So the usable ones are 254 IP addresses. Similarly, let's look at block 2. It's 192.168.1.0 and 192.168.1.0, which is the network address, 192.168.1.1 to 192.168.1.254 is the usable ones, okay? And broadcasters 192.168.1.255. Same logic, 254 IP addresses, usable IP addresses over here. The topmost block and the bottommost block is the network and the broadcast address, okay? So if you guys have noticed over here, 192.168.0 is the exact same. It's locked in because it's the network part, and the 0 is the host part. Same in usable 192.168.0, 192.168.0, 192.168.0. They're all locked in, okay, because they're a network part. What changes the host part? Here's 0, here's 1, here it was 0, here it was 1, here it was 254, here it is 255. Similarly, in block 2, if you see, it's 192.168.1, 192.168.1, 192.168.1, 192.168.1. They stay locked in. They do not change of every block. What changes is the host part, okay? Host part. host part, okay, they all change. So because the because the way it is designed, we usually identify this as network.network.network.host. Okay, makes sense? So this is how the class C IP address was, the infrastructure was designed. Okay, now let's go to class B. Now that we have completed class C, let's get into how class B is. Okay, let's deep dive into this. I've isolated class B into this our screen, and let's zoom in. So class B basically was, it started with 128.0.0.0 to 199.255.255.255. Okay, let's take the first example block of how it was. The network address was 128.0.0.0. Usable address was 128.0.0.1 to 128.0.254 to 255. And broadcast is 128.0.255.255. Now you'll find something interesting is that in block B, just 1 second, yeah, block B, 128.0. These two are locked. 128.0. These two are locked. The first two are locked. Okay? But what changes is the last two numbers of the IP. The last two numbers, they change. In class B, it was mainly for like medium-sized enterprises, medium-sized businesses, fairly large, but not as large. Okay? So let's open up a calculator. So if you remember, in class C, we had 254 usable IP addresses, but if we include the network address and the broadcast address, the total will be 256. Okay, so in this one, if we also, because in class C only the last number changed, but in this the second last and last both numbers are changing. So if this means we will have 256 into 256, 65536, and we have to minus two IP addresses because we are removing the network address as well as the broadcast address. So if we minus 2, it will be 65534. Okay, so this is that's approximately 65,65534 IP addresses, usable IP addresses are available to us. Okay, if you look at the example block 2, okay, 128.1.0.0, that's the network address. So usable is 128.1.0.1, 128.1.255.254. This is a usable one. You can read it for yourself. And then there's a broadcast address, which is 128.1.255.255. Again, if you see, the first two are locked. The first two numbers are locked. Okay? Only what changes is the last two numbers. Similarly, over here, last two numbers. Network part, host part. Okay? So this means this gave us way more options than class C. Yeah, so now that we have completed class B, let's move over to class A. Class A is like the most unhinged of them all because they are usually used for like extremely large businesses. Again, let me repeat. This entire infrastructure that we are looking at, it is all public IP. Everything was public. As I said, the concept of private IP address did not exist. That was before 1993. Okay, again, why? Because there are fewer devices on the internet, so classification was a lot more straightforward. So, without wasting much time, let's get into class A, how it was. Okay. Now, class A, again, I need to clarify one thing. Class A mathematically begins from 0.0.0.0 to 127.255.255.255. However, IP addresses of 0.0.0.0 and 127.0.0.1, they are for mainly loopback address for either placeholders or loopback. I'll get into it later, okay? Or we can just skip that for now. It's not important. So right now we can just ignore this, and this was the actual practical version of class A. That is 1.0.0.0 to 126.255.255.255. Okay. So keeping this in mind, let's only focus on the practical usage of class A, the practical range, and let's get into how the blocks were, set. So if you look at block number 1, it's 1.0.0.0, that is the network address. Usable is 1.0.0.1 to 1.255.255.254. Broadcast was 1.255.255.255. Okay, this is block number 1. This is block number 2. Okay, 2.0.0.0 to 2.0.0.1 to 2.255.255.254. This was the usable one. The broadcast was 2.255.255.255. You can read it for yourself. Now, if you notice, only the first number is locked in. First number is locked in. Here, first number is locked in. First number is locked in. The rest all, it changes. This is the host part. Host part. Host part. Host part. Again, host part. Host part. Host part. Host part. Right. Host part. Okay. So yeah, since we have the option to open up a calculator. Okay. So it will be just 1 second. Yeah. So since the first part is the network part, which is locked, the rest 3 host part, we have the option. So 256 into 256 into 256. That is 16 million whatever. If we minus 2, it will be this. 16 million whatever. Okay. So in this one, we have 16 million whatever IP addresses. Okay. I'm just going to call it 16 million approximately. Okay. So these are these many options we have, these many usable IP addresses we have, okay? And since this is formatted in such a way that only the first number is locked in while the other 3 are not, so which is why we have formatted as network.host.host.host, okay? This is how we have created the architecture of class A, okay? So, which is why class A IP addresses were for extremely large, organizations and business enterprises. Okay. Now, let's get into, we have also covered this. Now, let's get into multicast and experimental, what they were. Yeah. So, just to give you an example of what multicasting is, okay, if this is computer 1, okay, let's name it number 1. And this is computer A, computer B, computer C, computer D, computer E, okay? So for your reference, what casting actually means. So let's have computer A. First, let's get into broadcast and unicast, okay? So unicast means computer 1 would only want to connect to computer A. It does not want to connect to computer B, computer C, computer D. It does not want to connect to either of them. So if it's only connecting to computer A, that is unicast. UNICAST. Okay? Okay, so this is what unicast is. Now let's get into broadcast. What broadcast is? Yep, I think covered it in the previous video where computer 1 would want to connect to computer A, computer B, computer C, computer D, computer E all at the same time. Okay, it wants to connect to them, all of them. So that means this is broadcast. Now, what is multicast? Multicast is when computer 1 wants to talk to computer A, wants to talk to computer C, computer E, but it does not want to talk to computer D and computer B. Okay, so that is multicast. As in multiple computers it wants to talk to at the same time, but it also wants to leave out a few. So that is multicast, okay? So now that we have understood this concept, multicast, this is what class G was used in multicasting, okay? The range was 224.0.0.0 to 239.255.255.255. Class E is experimental. That is for, some scientists, for research, for whatever. So 244.0.0.0 to 255.255.255. These are highly experimental. We do not touch this. Okay? In fact, most of you users, you will not be touching class D and class E. You'll be mostly focusing on class A, class B, and class C. So you can pretty much leave this alone. Okay? Also, another fun fact that I want to provide is that class D and class E, it was moved over. As in this framework remained till date. Okay? But this earlier framework of the pre-1993, it kind of collapsed. It was made obsolete. Why it was made obsolete, we will get into the next video, okay? So thank you. I hope you understood so far. Thank you for watching the history of how classes work, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.